That is the first thing you should understand before I give you the rest. People think a man remembers the worst moment of his life with perfect clarity, frame by frame, carved into stone, lit from every side. It is not like that, not for me. The closer I get to that half second on the gravel, the more it slips away from me. The colors change. The sound moves around. Sometimes the car is silver. Sometimes it is the color of wet slate. Once in a dream, it had no color at all, just a shape coming, a weight, the idea of a thing rather than the thing itself, growing in the corner of my eye the way a headache grows, slow and then all at once. So let me confess something before I start properly. I do not trust my own head. I have been a royal guard for 21 years. I have stood at the doors of rooms where men decided the fate of the kingdom while I pretended to be furniture. I have watched a queen weep where no one was meant to see her, and looked at the wall so hard my eyes ached, so that she would never know I had. I have held a line in the Eastern Pass when the line had no business holding, when the man beside me went down with an arrow in his throat and made a sound I still hear some nights. I have done the job, the whole job, the parts they tell stories about and the parts they don't. And after all of it, the only thing my mind ever chose to break over was a Tuesday morning, a gray courtyard, a car that should never have been there, and a half second that I will carry the way other men carry a limp. I am going to tell it anyway. Not because I have it right. I have already told you I don't. I'm going to tell it because if I don't put it down somewhere outside my own skull, it will keep rearranging itself in there, night after night, until even the shape of it is gone, and then I'll have nothing left of the worst and most important morning of my life except the knowledge that it happened to someone with my name. Bear with the parts where I double back. I am not a writer. I am a man who stood at doors. The story does not come out of me in a straight line because it did not happen to me in a straight line. It came in pieces over years, and some of the pieces I would give a great deal to give back. It is important that I start before the morning. Everyone who has ever told this story starts with the car, because the car is the loud part, the part that fits on a banner. But the car is the end of something, not the beginning. And if I only give you the car, then I am lying to you the same way I let everyone lie about me for a while. So the week before. It was spring, but a poor one. The kind of spring that can't commit to being warm. The cloud sat low over the east wing most mornings like it had nowhere better to be and no intention of leaving. There was a sickness in the lower town that year. There's almost always a sickness in the lower town. But that year it was a bad one. A fever that came on fast and took the old and the very young, and that spring a great many who should have been neither. We heard about it the way the palace hears about everything that happens below it. As a rumor, a number, a thing that happened to other people in another country that happens to share a wall with ours. I want to be honest that I did not think about it much. I'm not proud of that. A fever in the lower town was, to me, a reason to be a little more careful about the water and the kitchen staff and nothing more. That is what the palace does to you over 21 years. It does not make you cruel exactly. It makes you far. It puts a distance between you and everything on the other side of the wall, and the distance feels like safety and is actually just blindness with better manners. My feet hurt that week. I mention it because it's true, and the true things are mostly small and unimpressive, and a story made only of large and impressive things is a story someone invented. My left boot had a seam coming apart at the heel. I had been meaning to take it down to the cobbler in the lower town for the better part of a month, and I had not, because I am careless about my own things in a way I never am about the job. 21 years of caring more about a door than about my own feet. So I stood my watches that week with a sore heel and a temper shorter than it should have been, shifting my weight from foot to foot the way you are explicitly trained not to, because a guard who fidgets is a guard who can be read. And there was the man at the gate. He came on a Monday. The lower gate, not the grand one, the working one, where the carts come and the staff come, and the world's ordinary business is let in a few feet at a time. I was not on the lower gate myself that day, but Halden was, and Halden was a good man with good instincts, and he flagged it up the chain the way you're supposed to, which means it reached me by the afternoon. A man, middle years though it was hard to tell, the lower town ages people early. A worn coat, brown going to no color at all, standing across the way from the lower gate, not close, not doing anything that you could put a name to, just standing, watching the yard, watching the comings and goings. Halden moved him on, polite but firm, the way we do, and the man went without trouble, and that should have been the end of it. He came back Tuesday. Same coat, same spot, same watching. Halden moved him on again, less polite this time, and noted that the man's eyes had gone to the inner yard, past the gate, to where, if you knew the rhythm of the palace, and anyone who watched for 2 days could learn the rhythm of the palace, you would know that certain people crossed at certain hours. By Tuesday afternoon, I had a man in my head. This is the part I have to be most careful about, because this is where the whole thing was decided, days before the car, in the quiet country of my own assumptions. I took Halden's report, a man, a coat, 2 days of watching, and I built something out of it. I am good at building these things. It is, in a sense, the core of the job, to look at very little and imagine the worst and prepare for the worst, so that when the worst does not come, which is almost always, you have wasted only worry, and when it does come you are ready. That is the trade. You spend your life rehearsing disasters that never arrive so that you are not surprised by the one that does. But I overbuilt. In the slow hours of the watch, with my sore heel and my short temper, I gave that watching man a plot. I gave him patience, and patience implies a goal, and a goal at a palace implies a target, and there is only ever one kind of target that matters. I gave him, in my head, the cold competence of someone who had done this before. I gave him accomplices I had no evidence for. By Wednesday, when I briefed the morning detail, I had turned a desperate-looking man in a brown coat into the leading edge of a conspiracy, and I had my men watching for the wrong shape of danger entirely. Wednesday he didn't come. Thursday he didn't come. And here is where the job betrays you, where 21 years of experience becomes a kind of stupidity. When the watcher stopped coming, I did not think the threat has passed, or I was wrong about him. I thought they know we've seen them. They're being careful. It's getting close. Nothing happening to a guard is not evidence that there is nothing to fear. It is evidence that the enemy is good. The mind that is built to find threats cannot be talked out of one by mere absence. Absence just makes it lean closer. So by the end of that week I was waiting, coiled, watching every cart that came up the slope, every face at the gate, for a man in a brown coat or his invisible friends. I had decided what the danger would look like. I had decided where it would come from: the lower gate, on foot, patient and cold. I had built a door in my mind and hung the threat behind it, and I stood ready to throw myself against that door. Which is precisely why, when the danger finally came, it came through a different door entirely, and found me looking the wrong way. I want you to hold on to that, because it is the truest thing I know about my whole profession, and I learned it at the cost of nearly getting a princess killed. Being ready for the wrong danger makes you slower to the real one. A man braced for a knife is not braced for a falling roof. All that readiness, all that coiled attention, it has a direction, and the direction was wrong, and the wrongness of it cost me half a second I will never stop paying for. I am going to do something now that I could not do on the day and could not do for 2 years after the day. I am going to tell you about the boy, properly, as a person, and not as the thing that came out of the car. I did not know any of this at the time. Every word of what follows I learned afterward in pieces, some of it from the physician, some from a woman in the lower kitchens who would barely look at me. Some of it I have had to imagine and have tried to imagine honestly. I put it here, out of order, before the car, because the whole sickness of the thing is that I had the truth standing right in front of me and could not see it, and I want you to see it even though I couldn't. His name does not matter for this. I'll call him the boy because that is what he was. 16, though when they pulled him out of the car he looked younger because terror runs a face backward, scrubs the years off it, leaves it all child. He had a sister, older than him by a few years. Their parents were gone, the fever the year before or the year before that. The lower town keeps a different calendar, measured in who is missing. So it was the two of them. She had got work in the palace kitchens, the lower kitchens, the hot loud cavern where the real bulk of the cooking happens, far below the rooms where the food is finally carried out looking like art. Honest work. Hard work. The kind of place I had walked past 1,000 times and never once seen because it was below me in every sense of the word. She brought home what she could. She kept the two of them. And that spring, when the fever came up out of the lower streets and into the houses, she took it. I have tried to imagine the boy in those days, and I find I can, too easily. A house going quiet. A sister burning, then shaking, then burning. The neighbors keeping away, because that is what you learn to do when a fever is in the street, you keep away. You let the door stay shut. You tell yourself it's sense and not cowardice. A boy of 16 watching the one person left to him in the world come apart on a pallet, and no money for a physician, and the lower town physicians overrun anyway, dying themselves, half of them, or fled. And then the idea, the terrible, hopeful, childish idea. He knew where his sister worked. He knew there was a physician up there, the royal one, the king's own, the man who kept to the palace and tended only the great. To a frightened boy, that physician was not a person with limits. He was a kind of magic that existed and was simply being withheld, if he could only reach him. If he could only get past the gate and the guards and the wall, and put the right words in front of the right man, then surely, the magic would come down and save her, because how could it not when it was right there, when it existed? When the only thing between his sister and life was a wall and some men with swords. He was wrong about all of it. He was wrong that the physician could have helped. I'll come to that, and it is the cruelest part. But the wrongness is not the point. The point is the shape of the thing he believed, because I have come to think it is the most human shape there is. The cure exists, and someone is keeping it from me, and if I am only brave enough I can cross the distance and take it. He tried the gate first. Of course he did, he must have. I am almost certain that the watching man in the brown coat was not a conspirator at all. I think he was the boy's uncle, or a neighbor, or simply a desperate adult who had come up to the palace to try the same hopeless errand on the boy's behalf, to stand near the gate and work up the courage to beg, and had been moved on twice by men doing their jobs. By Haldon. By the wall I had spent a week reinforcing. The thing I had built a conspiracy out of was a poor man trying to ask for help and being told, politely and firmly, to go away. I will never know that for certain. The watcher never came forward and I never found him. But I have turned it over 1,000 times, and a frightened relative makes far more sense than an assassin who watches for 2 days and then vanishes. I built a villain out of a beggar. We always do. The wall does not ask why the man at the gate is desperate. The wall just holds. So the gate was closed to them. The polite, firm, immovable gate. And the sister got worse. And on the Tuesday morning, the boy did the only thing left that his 16-year-old mind could reach for. If they would not let a kitchen girl's brother walk through the gate to beg, then he would not walk. He would arrive in a way they could not turn away. He would go straight to the physician's door, the one he must have learned about from his sister, the door that opens, God help us all, onto the upper courtyard. And to do that he stole a car. I keep using that word, stole, and it makes it sound like a plan, like cunning, and it was neither. He took a motor car that was sitting in the lower yard, one of the few the palace kept, left while its driver saw to something. He had never driven in his life. This is not me being generous to him. It came out plainly afterward from the state of the thing and from his own broken account. He did not know how to drive. He knew, in the vague way a boy knows, that you got it going somehow and then it went. And he must have thought, if he thought at all, if there was room for thought under the fear, that the going was the hard part and the stopping would take care of itself. He got it going, and then it went, and he could not get it to stop. That rising scream of an engine that I would hear come up the slope and read, instantly, as menace, as attack, as the cold, competent enemy I had been waiting for all week. That was a child standing in panic on a pedal he did not understand, in a machine he could not control, aiming with the last of his courage for the one door he thought might save the only person he had left. He was not trying to kill anyone. He never saw the princess. He could not have told you she existed in that moment, or that the courtyard was anything but the road to the door. He was 16 and his sister was dying, and he was driving the wrong way through the worst morning of both our lives. That is the truth I threw my body in front of. That is the act I would knock to the gravel and be called a hero for. But I did not know it yet. On the morning I knew only the engine and the wrongness and the half-second. Let me take you there now. I have put it off long enough. It was the kind of morning you don't write home about. Gray, like I said, low cloud. The cold that doesn't bite just leans on you and gets into the seams of the armor and stays. I remember the smell more than anything, wet stone, the iron tang off the railings where the damp brought the rust up, and underneath it the kitchen starting their day, bread and wood smoke drifting up across the lower yard and into the upper one. Ordinary smells. The smell of a place where nothing is supposed to happen, where the most dangerous thing in a morning is usually a slippery step or a sharp word from someone who outranks you. I had been on since before light. The gate detail. My heel hurt. The seam in my boot had got worse and I could feel the cold coming through it now. A cold spot on the back of my foot, and I was thinking. I want to record exactly how small my mind was in the minutes before. I was thinking about the cobbler, and whether I'd have time on my next day off, and whether he'd charge me the full rate or remember I'd sent him custom. That is what occupied the mind of the great hero in the minutes before. A boot, a few coins. The animal in me was coiled and watching for a brown coat, yes, somewhere underneath, but the man on top was thinking about his foot. The princess was due to cross the courtyard at 9:15. She crossed most mornings around then. I want to be careful here, because the stories that came later like to suggest some bond between us, some private understanding between the loyal guard and the royal he watched over, and that is a lie, and it is the kind of lie that I think dishonors the truth, which is plainer and better. I did not know her. I had stood near her for years the way you stand near a clock on a wall, aware of it, oriented by it, not knowing it. She knew my face the way you know furniture. One time in all those years, at the spring fair, she had handed me her gloves to hold while she crouched to fix a strap on a child's pony, and she had said thank you when she took them back, and that was the entire history between us. A pair of gloves. Soft leather, cold from the air, held for 90 seconds and returned. I think about those gloves more than a sane man should. I cannot tell you why. The mind keeps what it keeps. She came out of the east door. I am sure of that, because the east door is heavy oak banded with black iron, and it has a particular low complaint when it swings, and I heard that complaint, and I straightened up out of my slouch the way the spine does after 21 years, before the mind has caught up, before I had even properly registered that it was her. The body knows the schedule even when the man is thinking about his boot. She turned left, toward the lower yard, the way she always went. Her feet were loud on the gravel because gravel is always loud. That is the entire reason for gravel, so that you hear people coming, so that no one crosses an open royal space in silence. I heard her steps. I want that on the record too. I heard her, ordinary, unhurried, crossing a courtyard on a gray Tuesday with her whole attention somewhere I'll never know. And then there was the engine. The thing about the engine is that it was wrong before I understood why it was wrong, and the gap between the wrongness and the understanding is where everything lives. A palace has a sound, a constant, layered, meaningless sound that you stop hearing the way you stop hearing your own breath, footsteps on stone, the call and answer of the watch, birds in the eaves, the far clatter of the kitchens. A bell somewhere marking something. Hooves on the cobbles of the outer yard. Wind in the high banners. It is a song with no melody, and you live your whole working life inside it, and it tells you, every single second without words, that the world is as it should be. You only ever notice the song when a note goes wrong. This note went wrong. It was too fast. That is the plainest way I can put it. Vehicles came into the yards at a crawl. There is a procedure, a checkpoint, my own men on it, and the sound of a car in a palace yard was a slow, careful, tiptoeing sound, tires turning on stone like a man trying not to wake a baby. This was not that. This was a rising, tearing, climbing note, coming up the slope from the direction of the lower yard faster than anything had any right to move inside these walls, and it cut across the song like a blade across a string. I felt it in my chest before I turned my head, a wrongness with no name yet. The animal in me, the thing that is older than the uniform and does not care about it, stood straight up inside my ribs and screamed without words. And here is my confession, the real one, the one I have never said out loud to a living person and am only able to write because no one is watching my face. For half a second I did nothing. Half a second, maybe less. I have no way to measure it and every way to relive it. But I have lived in that half second for over 20 years now, and I will tell you exactly what happened inside it, because I have had a great deal of time to examine it, and I owe you the truth. I heard the wrongness, and my body did not move, because part of me, the part I hate, the part I have argued with on 1,000 sleepless nights, part of me was waiting for the sound to resolve into something ordinary, a clumsy delivery, a fool of a driver who'd get a dressing down and a story to tell, a mistake, something that would let me keep standing still, that would let the morning stay a morning. The mind does not want the worst thing to be true. It will spend its very last half second begging the world for it not to be, bargaining, hoping, holding still in the hope that holding still will make it nothing. But there was a second reason I froze, and it is worse, and it took me years to admit it. I froze because the danger was the wrong shape. All week I had been braced for a man in a brown coat, on foot, patient and cold, coming through the lower gate. I had built that door in my mind and stood ready to hurl myself against it. And this, a screaming engine, loud, clumsy, announcing itself across an open yard, this did not fit. A real assassin, the cold one I'd invented, does not come like this. This was wrong for the plot I'd written. And in the half second my mind spent trying to force this loud wrong thing into the cold, quiet shape I'd prepared for, the car came round the corner of the wall. I saw it. I saw where she was standing. And I saw the line between the two of them, the straight, closing, impossible line, and the begging stopped, and the plot in my head tore in half, and the animal finally got the man out of its way. I do not remember deciding to run. People ask that, the few who have heard the true bones of it and not just the banner version. They ask what went through my head in the moment. And the honest answer, the one they don't like because it isn't noble and doesn't fit on a banner, is nothing. Nothing went through my head. There was no thought, no calculation, no brave inner voice saying, "Go now, save her." The half second of waiting simply ended, and the next thing I have, the very next thing my memory holds, is the gravel coming up to meet my knees, and the weight of her against my arm, and the sound, God, the sound of the car going past close enough that I felt the air of it shove me sideways, warm, a breath off something huge and living. That is the gap. Between the line and the gravel there is nothing in me, no film of it. My body crossed that distance and did not tell me. 21 years of standing at doors, and the one moment it all came down to, I was not present for. Some other version of me, some animal wearing my boots, covered 6 or 7 paces in a time the men who measured it afterward did not believe, and I have no memory of a single one of them. I have tried to fill the gap, so many times. I have gone out into that courtyard at night, off duty, no armor, just a man in a coat, and walked the line slowly, heel to toe, counting. 6 paces, maybe 7 from my post to where she stood. I have stood at my post and shut my eyes and tried to make my mind play the crossing back to me, and it will not. It gives me the wrongness and it gives me the gravel, and between them it gives me a blank as smooth and total as a wall. Whatever I am, the part of me that did the only thing in my life worth telling about, I have never been able to meet. He did it and went, and left me on my knees to take the credit and the blame. What I have instead of the crossing is the after, and the after I have in too much detail. The gravel cold, coming up through my trousers at the knee where I'd gone down hard. Small stones pressed into my left palm where I'd put my hand out to stop us both going right over into a roll. The sting of it, and later the blood, 3 little cuts I would not notice for an hour. Her shoulder under my forearm. I'd got an arm right across her, around her, the way you grab a falling child, no dignity in it at all, no protocol, no thought for who she was, just grab, just hold, just stop the falling. A princess of the realm, snatched and crushed against a guard's chest plate like a sack of grain. They would gloss that later, make it graceful. It was not graceful. It was the least graceful thing 2 human bodies have ever done together, and it is the only truly honest thing I have ever done in that uniform. Her breath. I remember her breath because it was fast and shallow and right against my ear, and it was the most human sound I had ever heard a royal make. Not a queen's breath, not a princess's, not the breath of someone who decides things and is decided about. Just a frightened person's breath, quick, shaking, broken, alive. For a moment, kneeling in the gravel with my arm crushing her and her breath in my ear, there was no rank between us at all. Just 2 animals who had nearly been killed and had not been breathing. And the brakes. The smell of the brakes is the detail that will not leave me, that has outlasted nearly everything else, that I expect to have in my nose on the day I die. Hot rubber and scorched stone, a stink that does not belong in a palace, sharp and chemical and wrong. The car had finally stopped. The boy had found the pedal, or hit the wall, or simply run out of yard, and it sat there ticking and stinking, and that smell hung in the air for an hour and hung in the grout of my teeth for far longer. For months afterward, any time I caught anything close to it, a smith's forge, a cart dragging a locked wheel, a particular kind of smoke, I was back on the gravel in an instant, hand bleeding, her breath in my ear, the song of the palace shattered around me. Someone took her from me. I do not know who. Hands gentle and urgent lifting her up and away, and I let her go, and I stayed down on my knees like a man at prayer, shaking. I want that recorded too, because the banner version leaves it out. I shook. Not later in private where a man is allowed to. Then, there, in front of all of them. The man who had supposedly just done the great brave thing knelt in the gravel with his hands trembling too hard to hold and could not make himself get up, and the others swarmed past him toward the car, and he stayed down, useless as a dropped glove, while his body slowly gave him back. The car had stopped, and this is where every version of the story, including the one I myself believed and told for 2 years, goes a particular way. The way it is built to go. The way we are all built to make it go. Assassin. That was the word the whole machine of the palace lurched toward in the space of a breath. We are guards. That is the shape we are made to see. A car comes screaming into the royal yard, a hair from the princess, and there is only one story that fits what we are. An attempt on her life, an enemy, a plot, perhaps the very plot I'd been bracing for all week, finally arrived. Within a minute there were a dozen of us. Swords out. The car ringed. Shouting. There was a great deal of shouting, hard and overlapping, the particular sound of frightened armed men who have decided what is happening and intend to be equal to it. And I was still on the ground in the middle of it, given back to myself just enough to understand that the danger I'd spent a week imagining had, it seemed, finally come, and that I had been right all along, and that the rightness tasted of scorched rubber and felt like nothing at all. They dragged the driver out. I heard it more than I saw it from where I knelt, the door wrenched, the protest of metal, voices going from hard to confused, and I expected, we all expected, the cold man. The brown coat. A face with a purpose behind it, the face of someone who had meant every second of it. What came out of the car was a boy. I will not pretend I understood it in that moment. I didn't. None of us did. A boy did not fit the story any better than a screaming car had fit it, and a mind braced for a villain does not simply set the brace down because the thing in front of it is small and shaking. For a while, and this shames me, the sword stayed up, and the shouting went on, and the boy was face down on the stone with 3 blades on him, because we could not let go of the shape we decided on. A child was easier to fold into assassin than to admit there had been no assassin at all. Perhaps he was a tool. Perhaps he was a decoy. Perhaps, the mind that is braced for a week will invent a great deal rather than admit the brace was for nothing. But he was screaming a name. Not a curse, not a slogan, not the kind of thing a man with a cause screams when his cause has failed. A name, a girl's name, the same 2 syllables over and over, raw, his voice breaking on them. I did not know whose name. I learned later it was his sister's, but even on the day, even through the ringing in my own head, I heard the shape of it, and the shape of it was wrong for everything we decided. You do not scream a girl's name like that when you have just tried to murder a princess. You scream a name like that when you are 16 and terrified, and the world has just ended in a way you do not understand. There was a smell off him, too. I knew it. Every guard knows it. The sour reek of a person who has been sick with pure terror, who has voided themselves with fear. It is not the smell of an enemy. It is the smell of prey. They had him on the stone with the swords on him before anyone thought to ask the obvious question, the question that should have come first and came shamefully late. Why would a child drive a stolen car at killing speed into the royal yard? And the answer, when it finally came, over the following days in pieces, unmade me board by board like a ship taken apart in dry dock. But that came later. On the day, there was no answer. On the day, there was only a boy face down in the gravel screaming a name, and a princess being hurried indoors, and a guard on his knees who had been called nothing yet, who did not know that the next thing he would be called was hero, and that it would be the start of the longest lie of his life. It became a triumph faster than I could understand it, and that speed was its own kind of sickness. By the afternoon there was aversion. By the evening the version had set hard like plaster into a shape that no later truth could fully break. The loyal guard, the speeding threat, the heroic dive, the princess unharmed by a hair. It is a good story. I understand why it set so fast. It is the story the palace needed. It had been frightened badly in front of itself, and a frightened institution wants nothing so much as proof that it is, after all, safe, that its walls hold, that its men are equal to the worst. I was that proof. My dive was the wall holding. Of course they seized it. Of course it set. They wanted me in front of people. There was talk, by the next morning, of a commendation, of the kind of formal notice that follows a man for the rest of his service, and is read out when he is buried. Men I had served beside for 20 years gripped my shoulder, and looked at me with something I did not at first have a name for, something between pride and hunger, as though a little of what I had supposedly done might rub off onto them if they touched me. Younger guards looked at me the way I had once looked at the old men who'd held the Eastern Pass. The way you look at someone who has been tested in the one way that matters in our trade and not been found wanting. And here is the second confession, the one that sits beside the first and is in some ways worse, because the freeze was a thing my body did to me in half a second. But this I chose, awake, over hours and days. I let it happen. For about a day and a half before the truth began to come up through the cracks like water through a flagstone floor, I let it be the story. I let them call it what they wanted. I did not correct the shape of it. I bowed my head when they praised me. I let the word hero settle onto my shoulders like a borrowed coat, and I let it warm me, and I knew the whole time, underneath the warmth, that I had frozen for half a second too long, and that only the animal in my boots, the version of me I have never been able to meet, had paid the debt while I stood begging the morning to be ordinary. Why did I let it? I have asked myself for 20 years. The kind answer is that I was in shock, that a man who has nearly watched a death and very nearly caused one is not at his most truthful in the hours after. There is something to that. But the truer answer is meaner, and I will give it to you because I promise the truth. I let it because the borrowed coat was warm and I was cold. Because being a hero felt better than being a man who froze. Because the alternative story, the half-second, the gap, the begging, was mine alone, secret, unprovable, and the triumph was loud and shared and offered freely, and I was tired, and I am not a better man than that. No one is, I think, in the day and a half after. We take the hand on the shoulder. We let them tell us we are what they need us to be. I have made my peace with most of myself over the years. That day and a half I am still working on. It was the physician who broke it, the royal one, the old man. He came to me 3 days after at the lower gate where I had asked to be put. I could not stand the upper yard anymore. I could not cross the gravel. I had tried the second day and got halfway across the courtyard and had to stop, because the smell came up out of nowhere, the brakes, the scorched stone, though there was nothing burning, and my hands started to go, and a guard whose hands go in the open yard is no guard at all. So I asked to be moved to the lower gate, and they let me and called it modesty, the hero declining the grand post, and added it to the legend. Everything I did in those weeks got folded into the legend, even the things that were only fear wearing a better name. The physician was an old man, dry as paper, with no warmth to waste on anyone and no intention of pretending otherwise. He did not come to thank me. I want to be clear about that, because if he had come to thank me I might have been able to keep the coat on. He came because he had dressed the 3 small cuts on my left hand that first day. Someone had sent for him in the chaos, and he had done it the way he did everything, briskly, without comment. And he was the kind of man who finished what he started, and he wanted to see the cuts had closed clean. That was all. A professional tying off a loose end. It was evening. The torches were lit along the lower wall. That smell of pitch and smoke I will also carry to my grave, layered now forever with the brakes. He took my hand without asking, the way physicians do, turned it to the torchlight, looked at the 3 healing lines on my palm. And while he looked at them, not at me, in a voice as flat as a ledger, he told me about the girl. The boy's sister, the kitchen girl. He told me the fever had taken her, that she had died, and here he was precise, because he was always precise, and the precision was a knife, that she had died the same night her brother drove a stolen car into the royal courtyard to fetch a physician for her. The same night. And then he told me the thing that I have not been able to set down in 20 years. He told me, still looking at my palm and not my face, still in that flat ledger voice, that it would not have mattered, that she had been too far gone for days, that the fever, by the time the boy made his mad ride, had already done what it does, and that he, the great royal physician, the magic the boy had risked everything to reach, could not have saved her if the boy had appeared at the right door, at the right hour, on his knees, with all the courtesy in the world. The errand was hopeless before the wheels ever turned. The cure the boy was driving toward did not exist. It had never existed. He had thrown his whole self, his sister's last living night, his own freedom and very nearly his life, at a wall behind which there was nothing at all. The physician finished with my hand, said the cuts had healed clean, and went back up the slope toward the upper yard without another word, leaving me at the lower gate with the torch spitting beside me and the borrowed coat coming off all at once, in one motion, the way a coat comes off when the peg gives way. Cold, suddenly, everywhere it had been warm. Let me lay it out plainly, the way I had to lay it out for myself that night and have relayed it 1,000 nights since, because it is the center of everything and I do not want to soften it. I had been called a hero for stopping that car. And what I had actually done, the only thing I had actually done, with my body if not my will, was make certain that a terrified boy's last, mad, loving act, the final thing he would ever do for his sister while she still drew breath, ended in a ring of swords and his face in the gravel instead of at a physician's door. Not that the door would have saved her. It would not have. But he did not know that, and now he would carry both. That he had failed, and that he had been knocked down and bound and called a would-be murderer for trying. The princess had never been in the kind of danger they said. There was no plot, no brown-coated assassin. The watcher at the gate was, I am near certain, only another desperate soul trying the same hopeless errand and being turned away by the wall I had spent a week making stronger. The thing I had braced for all week had never existed, and the thing that actually happened was not an attack at all. It was a tragedy already in motion that I had stepped into the middle of and stopped, not the death. The death happened anyway, in a hot, dark house in the lower town that same night, but stopped the attempt. The boy's doomed run at saving her and been crowned for the interruption. 2 stories, his and mine, and both of them false. He thought there was a cure and there was none. I thought there was a killer and there was none. We had both been running, full speed, terrified, certain, at the wrong thing entirely. The only difference between us is that I was running in armor, with the wall behind me, and he was running in a stolen car with nothing behind him at all. And for our 2 matching errors, he was bound and broken in a cell, and I was being measured for a commendation. I sat down against the lower wall that night, after the physician left, in full view of my own men, and I did not get up for a long time, and no one made me, because they thought it was modesty, and I let them think it, because by then I no longer trusted myself to open my mouth and have the truth not come out. I would like to tell you I did something noble next. I did not. Not the clean kind of noble that makes a good ending and lets a man sleep. But I did one thing, and it is the one thing in all of this that was actually mine, chosen, awake, with my whole self present, no animal in my boots doing it for me. And so I will tell it even though it is small and only half worked. I asked about the boy. They had taken him, of course. There are places they take you and they are not kind, and I knew exactly how unkind because I had walked men to those places myself more than once and stood at the door while it closed and gone home and slept. I knew the road he was on, and I found that I could not stand it. So I spent the coin. The borrowed coat of hero turned out to be good for exactly one thing, and I spent it on him. I went to men who, a week before, would not have given me 10 seconds, men far above me, men who decided things, and who now could not quite refuse the guard from the courtyard, the proof that the wall held. And I told them what the physician had told me, that the boy was 16, that his sister worked in their own kitchens and had died of the fever the same night, that there was no plot, no cause, no enemy, only a child who had done a stupid, doomed, loving thing because the gate would not open for a poor man asking nicely. I did not demand. I am not built to demand of such men, and I will not pretend I was braver in that room than I was. I asked. I asked them to remember he was a child and not a conspirator when they decided what to do with him. It half worked. I want to be honest about the half. He did not hang. That is the part that worked, and it is not nothing. It is, in fact, the most that I have ever managed to wring out of my whole career, and I am aware that to the boy it may not feel like mercy at all. He did not hang, and he did not go to the worst of the places, the ones I would not describe to you. Something lesser was arranged. A term and then out into a lower town with no sister in it. The half that did not work I have to carry beside everything else. Because somewhere down there now is a young man, not a boy anymore, he'll be a man by now, who will go through his entire life knowing that his sister died the same night. He did the bravest and most useless thing a person can do, and that a guard knocked him to the gravel for it and bound him, and that the guard was called great for it across the whole kingdom while he himself was called a criminal. I do not know if he hates me. I have wondered a great deal. I think if he does, I would understand it completely, and I think, this is a strange thing to want, I think I would almost prefer it. Hatred is at least a clean thing to be owed. It is honest. It does not pretend the books are balanced when they are not. I never tried to find him after. I told myself it would only reopen it for him, that the kindest thing was to stay away, to be the wall one last time on the other side of it. That may even be true, but I know, underneath, that a part of it was simpler and meaner, that I could not bear to stand in front of him and have him look at my face and know exactly what I was. The hero who froze. The wall that stopped the cure. The princess sent for me. Once. Some weeks later, when the loudest of the noise had died down and the legend had settled into the comfortable shape it would keep. This is the part the stories get most wrong, the part they most love to embroider, and so let me be very plain about how small it actually was, because the smallness is the whole point and the embroidery ruins it. She did not weep on me. She did not take my hands in hers and thank me with a full heart. She was not, I think, even particularly moved. She was a practical woman, the most practical I have ever stood near, and she had nearly been hurt and a man had stopped it, and that was to her a fact to be acknowledged correctly, not a bond to be forged in front of a fire. I stood in a room I had guarded the outside of 100 times and had never once been inside. It was smaller than I'd imagined and plainer, and there were papers on a table, work interrupted. She thanked me. Properly, by name, she knew my name, which startled me more than it should have, because I had spent 20 years being a face by a door and had forgotten I might be a name to anyone up there. And then she said a thing I did not expect, and it is the only part of this whole long wound that does not have a knife in it, the one clean thing I get to keep. She said she had heard about the boy, that I had spoken for him. She did not have to know that. No one in that room would have told her unless she had asked, and there was no reason on earth for her to ask. The guard's quiet errand on behalf of a kitchen girl's brother was not the kind of thing that travels upward. It travels downward, if it travels at all, into the lower town, into the kind of talk I would never hear. But she had asked. She had gone looking, past the legend, past the courtyard, for what the man had actually done when no one was watching and there was nothing in it for him. She looked at me for a moment. I will not pretend I know what was behind it. I have sworn off pretending I know what is behind royal faces. I got it catastrophically wrong about an entire week of danger, and I will not start guessing again now. But she looked at me and she said that it was the right thing what I had done. And she meant the boy, not the courtyard, the boy. She put her finger, deliberately or by luck I will never know, on the only act in the entire affair that had actually been mine, the only one I had chosen, fully awake, with my whole self in it, no instinct, no animal, no week of misplaced bracing. The small one. The one no one had given me a single word of credit for. The one that was only a tired man spending his one coin of luck on a stranger's child, for nothing, expecting nothing. That was the right thing, she said, the small one. I do not think she understood what she had given me. Why would she? To her it was a sentence, a thing said and done, and she went back to her papers. But to me it was the difference between a man and a story about a man. For weeks I had been drowning in a version of myself I knew to be false and could not climb out of, because every hand reaching down to me was reaching for the false one, pulling the legend up, leaving the man at the bottom. And she, by accident or by that terrible practical clear-sightedness, reached past the legend and named the real thing, the small chosen thing, and pulled that up instead. And I have held on to it for 20 years. It is the only part of the whole morning I do not have to argue with. So, you wanted to know what went through my head on the gravel. Now you know it was nothing, that the bravest thing I am supposed to have done happened in a gap I cannot enter, performed by a version of me I have never been able to meet. Now you know what came after the nothing. And now you know the truth that took me 2 years, and a dry old physician at a torchlit gate to learn. That the speeding car which nearly killed Princess Anne was driven by a 16-year-old boy chasing a cure that did not exist, for a sister already lost, and that I have been celebrated for 21 years in this uniform. And the only minute of all of it I would actually keep is the one where I stood in a plain small room, and a practical woman told me the right thing I did was the one nobody clapped for. I still do not trust my memory of the courtyard. The car still changes color. Some mornings I wake and it is silver, and some mornings it is the color of wet slate, and once, like I told you at the start, it had no color at all. The order of things still rearranges itself. There are mornings I am almost sure there was a child with her, and there was no child. There was never a child. But the fear keeps trying to put one there, because a child is the worst place the fear can imagine, and the fear is not finished with me yet. I have stopped trying to fix it. I have made my peace with getting the big thing wrong, the threat, the danger, the shape of the enemy. I think I was always going to get it wrong. We all were. We are built to. The wall does not ask why the man at the gate is desperate. The wall does not ask whether the screaming engine is an assassin or a frightened boy. The wall just holds, and it cannot tell the difference between a killer and a brother. And most of the time that does not matter, and the one time it mattered most it nearly killed the person. It was built to protect and certainly broke the person it was meant to keep out. The only thing I have got right, the only thing I am sure of all the way down to the bottom, is the boy's face when they dragged him out of that car. All child, screaming a name that was not a slogan. The truest thing I ever saw in 21 years of standing near the great and the powerful, and I saw it face down in the gravel, in the half-second after my body finally caught up with me, in the wreckage of a morning I had spent thinking about my boot. That is the confession. That is all of it, as true as I can make it, which I have warned you is not very true at all, because I do not trust the man telling it, and neither should you. Make of me what you want. Most people already have. They made a hero. I have spent 20 years being one in public and a man who froze in private, and somewhere in the lower town there is someone who could tell you which of those is real, and I have never had the courage to go and ask him. I held her gloves once, 90 seconds. Cold leather, soft, the smell of the spring air still in them. I gave them back. I think in the end that is the most honest sentence I have. Everything they say I did, the dive, the save, the courage, I cannot vouch for any of it. It belongs to the animal in my boots. But the gloves I remember whole. The gloves I am sure of. A small kind thing held carefully and given back. Maybe that is all any of us are. The wall holding. And underneath it, when we are lucky, when someone reaches past the legend to find it, a pair of gloves held gently for 90 seconds and returned.